David Blaine on National Geographic.
Can't take your eyes away.
Enjoy ringside seats to
just who those are in just a while, as I told you before. But also a reminder that the INM Foundation is doing work that comes in from how they've actually been able to put 2% of the annual profit towards making sure that sustainable programs are actually front and center of what they do moving forward. Now, you want to make a difference most times, and you think, so how can I do that? Well, INM Bank is vested in making this difference as well. And how does that happen? Well, the INM Foundation is the community arm of INM Bank. 2% of their annual profit goes towards making sure that these programs come into place. For the past 5 years, the INM Foundation has been making a real difference, investing a significant amount of this money, the highest commitment in the Kenyan banking sector into impactful programs. Their work focuses on vital areas like education and skills development, economic empowerment, and enabling giving. But today we want to highlight their leadership in environmental conservation. The INM Foundation is dedicated to protecting our precious natural heritage through strategic partnerships and community-driven initiatives, ensuring a sustainable future for all. They believe in impact and are achieving it through focused action. As we renew our pact to keep impacting, learn more about the INM Foundation's vital work and how you can potentially collaborate by visiting inmbank.com/foundation to learn more. Powered by INM Bank. Our live streams up on Facebook, YouTube, and on X, and welcome to our audience on KTN. He's the 49th president of the Law Society of Kenya. Nelson Havi is in the hot seat this morning. Good morning, Wakili.
Good morning, ma'am.
How are you?
I'm great.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much.
Captain retired Dr. Simiyu Werunga is a public security and safety expert, and he's also here in the hot seat this morning. Good morning, Captain.
Morning.
How are you doing?
Doing very well.
Karibu sana. I know you asked me how to say my name. You know, we have two Denises in the room, so you can call me Denise at this point because we can just add one more to it. Why not?
Okay, thank you.
There's a conversation that it's grasped the nation at the moment, and everybody's looking for answers. And conversations, in many opinion, should lead towards answers, should lead towards solutions. The Situation Room, that's what we do here. Death in custody. Who is legally and operationally accountable? Those are the questions that we will be asking this morning. But we're going to go to Uganda for a minute. Dennis is going to tell us what the proverb is. We'd love both of you to give us your interpretation of the same. I think you might be interested in this one.
Yeah, so we are in Uganda, the land that is where the River Nile begins, yeah? And it's a country as well that enjoys abundance of rain, so therefore it's a breadbasket for the region. And the proverb of the day is, when the roots of a tree begin to decay, it spreads death to the branches. What would you make of that, Wakili?
Well, you see, a tree grows up and down. Mm. So if it dies downwards, it must die upwards. Relative to Uganda, and maybe it's a sign for us to say, I think there's something dying there.
Mm-hmm. I think I totally agree with him. Mm-hmm. If it's dying down, and we know they go both ways, down and up, and the down one is more important than the up. So if the down one dies, then you don't have much confidence in the up one.
Indeed. We were unfortunately privy to yet another situation whereby the answers may be known, but the answers are not being given. And there was a lot of speculation, and there was a lot of questions, and sadly not enough information in terms of giving information was available. And it would appear as though there was a cover-up here and there. And we're, of course, referring to what we now know for sure was the murder of Albert Ojwang that took place. We don't know where exactly. Still, somebody knows, but we don't know. But this conversation is for us to then be able to understand next steps legally, security-wise, in terms of what ought to happen. I want to start off with you, Wakili. with all the information that we saw, with an initial communication coming from the police service, which now we saw was fallacious, and thereafter we saw something else, and then with the results of the autopsy, it was very clear what happened to Albert Ojwang. And then we start to ask questions. From a legal point of view, when we say that this has happened from an institution of state, because to the best of our knowledge, he was not in the custody of anybody else but the police over those 13 hours, from the time he said to have left, according to his father, to the time that now we know he was admitted into the Central Police Station. What should have been, in terms of an order of command, and from a legal point of view, what should have been done to for him?
Now, it's a complex situation, but we'll simplify it. If a suspect is arrested, that suspect must be detained for a period not exceeding 24 hours within the police station where he's found. And if a crime is suspected to have been committed by that suspect, the suspect must be charged within the local limits of the jurisdiction. In this case, if Ojwang was suspected to have committed an offense, then he ought to have been arrested and arraigned in a court in Homa Bay. How did he end up in Nairobi? Well, I'm privy to what happens. In this particular case, it is Said Lagat sought the assistance of the Director of Criminal Investigations, who gave him certain officers who went all the way to Homa Bay, took custody of Ojwang, and brought him to Nairobi. When they brought him to Nairobi, they didn't take him to the DCI. They took him to Central Police Station, where he was booked, and the rest is what we hear. How do we interpret what we hear? First and foremost, this communication from the police was released by the Director of Corporate Communications, a gentleman by the name Nyaga. What did he tell us? He fell short of telling us that Ojwang had committed suicide. He told us that he banged his head on the wall and was found injured and unconscious and taken to hospital. So that is false. Starting point, Nyaga must be arrested for concealment of murder. Number two, who came to speak about this boldly? It was Kanja, the IG. What did he say? He said that Ojwang was apprehended because there was a complaint by the DIG, Lagat, that his name had been maligned. Two things. One, the DIG is the immediate in command in the police sector. How can he be a complainant in his cause? So the IG must also be arrested. Number two, the IG and DIG know there is no offense of maligning anybody's name. So they must equally be arrested. Let's go forward. It appears to be there are many other players in this enterprise that caused the loss of the life of Ojwang. They must also be arrested. I've had calls for the resignation of Kanja and resignation of Langat. These two people will not resign. They must forcefully be apprehended and taken to court and charged. That is the long and short of this matter. Yes.
Captain Murunga, when we look at security protocols, when we know that we're dealing with issues of the police and issues of a state institution, would there be any reason why there would be concealment of information when it came to the arrest? Why would that command not be followed? Why then, bringing him to Nairobi, would they not have taken him to DCI and then have taken him to Central Police booking? Why would that have happened?
Let's go step by step from what Wakeli has just said. If this person was arrested in that village in Homa Bay, he must and he should have been taken to the nearest police station. Under the police standing orders, they are called service standing orders. Every police station is a jurisdiction. Every police station has an area where everything that pertains to police servicing is supposed to be undertaken into that station. So why they decided to pick this guy from that region, from Homa Bay, bring him to Nairobi, and actually it's not, I don't think it's 13 hours, it's a long time, because it was Friday and the guy happened, I think it's over 30 hours. Why, the question we're asking, why did they move this person from Homa Bay to Nairobi? Because it doesn't matter whether it is a DCI who gave out people to assist Mr. Langat. We have also DCI officers in Homa Bay. And what the law says is very clear under their standing orders and the Police Service Act. Anything happening within the jurisdiction of a police station, which is an area, must be handled within that locality. So if these people felt that the late Ojwang had offended anybody, then they should have dealt with this issue where they arrested this person. The reason why they brought him up to Nairobi, they will need to tell Kenyans why. And number two, when you look at the standing orders, it is very clear what is supposed to be a gazetted retention center. For these hours from the time Ojwang was arrested and the time they dumped him, I'll use the word dumping because they dumped him in Central Police Station. We don't know what happened to Ojwang between these many hours. Standing orders are very clear. What is a gazetted retention center in this country under policing services? It's a police station. And the police station is commanded by an OCS at the rank of a chief inspector. And when you read their own standing orders, it says all policing services, the unit, the lowest unit and the only unit the police have is a police station. So whether you have a PPO, whether you have a regional commander, whether you have a sub-county commander, they all have to work with the OCS.
Captain.
So my question, my answer to your question is this. We need to be told, what is it that this late young man had done to the DIG that they had to pull him all the way from Homa Bay and bring him? And the same things could have been done in Homa Bay because they have everything under national, it's called what, service standing orders. So the question we're asking is, what was it so important that they had to bring this person from Homa Bay to Nairobi, and the time they took between the moment they picked him up and the moment they dumped him into Central Police Station? We've not been told what happened in the meeting.
So, Captain, if we go back to quickly the timeline of events.
Yes.
So Ojwang was arrested on Saturday at 1:30 p.m. from their home in Kakoth village.
Yes.
So the officers identified themselves and they said they were actually arresting him.
Yes.
So they moved from Kokwanyo location and they went all the way to Mawego police station, which is in Homa Bay.
Yes.
Because you spoke about jurisdiction.
Yes.
So the focus is Central Police, where, like you're saying, he was dumped, but also we are not told whether it was a handing over or it was just a formality to process him through Mawego police station, then now drive him all the way to Nairobi. Why was there a need? Because eventually they were bringing him to Nairobi. Why do you think they went to Mawego police station? Because we're actually not even told if there are any officers who have been interdicted or investigated at Mawego. The focus really is central.
From what we hear, and that's why I agree with Wakili, you know, these are stories. Because if this person was taken to Mawego police station, the record should be there. Because one of the things you need to do when you take somebody to a police station is to book the person. So what we need to be told after these investigations have taken place, we want to see the records that this person was taken to Mawego police station and the reason why he was transported from Mawego police station to Nairobi. We must be told. And because we are not being told whether we have any records, that's why we are having a lot of conjecture in what we are discussing, because we cannot understand with the National Police Service is one entity. And if these officers were sent all the way from Nairobi, this is what happens, because I've worked with the cops as a consultant for a long time. When you enter into somebody's jurisdiction, you must report to that OCS and say, we are here for this purpose of ABCD. These officers are allowed by their own standing orders to operate all over the country.
Okay.
But the only thing they have to do is every time they go to any jurisdiction outside their main, they must report to the OCS.
Okay. In terms of then what happens legally, we're going to come back to you in just a minute, Nelson. But let's hear from Albert himself. And this was a last call that he made before then being taken to the next place. So let's listen into that and then deduce from it.
Wanasema tufike Nairobi kwanza.
Hata nisijua nani. Mike ndani. How is it, Mazi? Mimi I've never experienced it. What's safe hapo ndani?
Nini?
Will I be safe?
Live?
Safe.
Yeah. Rumande ni safe. Wana challenges hapa na pale lakini mambo itakuwa fit. Nishaikuwa Inda. So mambo itakuwa poa na Inda is one of the worst police stations in Nairobi. So kesho hata kama sio kama Inda, ndafika hivyo Central kesho.
Okay.
So he's speaking to a friend of his, and what has he asked? Will I be safe? And he wasn't even sure where he was being taken. There was the question about whether he was going to be taken to industrial area. We can hear from that where they said it's one of the worst if you go there. But when you get there, do give us a call. That is the last conversation that he had with anybody. Now, Nelson, according to the law, if an arrest is to be made with or without the national jurisdiction that the DCI has, should there be a warrant of arrest? Because remember here that according to this story, it's the DIG who was offended. It is him who gave the order for these officers to go and pick him up. Can you just be picked up wantonly like that? Or should there be some kind of warrant? Should there be a previous complaint for which you then must answer?
We have settled this matter into impactful litigation. One is Republic versus Manduku, the current MP, and another one is Republic versus Kagoni, a magistrate. I handled both matters. And in the two cases, Justice Ogola and Justice Nyakundi said, an arrest should not be the first interaction between a suspect and the police. Mm-hmm. One must first be called and notified that he is required to appear before a police station and answer to certain charges. You should go willingly. Okay. There is abuse of police power. Why, for instance, will you send 3 Subarus to Homa Bay to go and pick a very defenseless, harmless young man? And it's not that the police are not aware of what is happening. As I've told you, these are decisions that have been made by the court. And in fact, I'll dare say the power to arrest, unless it is an offense that has occurred in the presence of a police officer, must be exercised only after a decision to prosecute has been made by the Director of Public Prosecution. Because where are you taking the person after arresting him unless you're taking him to a court of law? It's as simple as that. And this must be emphasized. The law is there. It has been interpreted by the court, but it's never enforced by police officers. And often, certain magistrates and judges fail to take action when these transgressions are brought to their attention, insofar as the presentation of suspects is concerned.
Wakili, on Monday,
Yes.
Dennis, on Monday, there was a statement, and the police said Ojwang was arrested for allegedly publishing false information. He was questioned on Saturday and booked under OB number 136, 76, 2025, and 935. Do we know his crime? Do we know what was published?
Two things, Dennis. There is no suspected crime. And if anything is to go by, the other gentleman who was also arrested for a similar suspected offense was found not to be a suspect. The ODPP said there is no evidence to charge him. But fundamentally, it must be understood, and it must be understood with clarity. If somebody maligns you, that is defamation. You need to file a civil claim. The High Court in Kenya has determined in many decisions that there is nothing like criminal defamation. Your reputation is a private civil matter. it's not a criminal matter. But why is this happening? I think we need to trace it maybe a year back. We've had innocent Kenyans abducted, detained, and killed because they have maligned the names of big people in this country. And these police officers have done it on behalf of these big people. Now they think they can do it on their own behalf. Therein lies the problem. And if we are to countermand this issue with finality, then our members of parliament must of necessity move a motion today in parliament to censor the cabinet secretary in charge of interior, to censor the PS in charge of interior, to censor the IG and the DIG. The moment they have done that, then it behooves the appointing authority to relieve these individuals of their public offices. And when they become civilians, we'll take them to court. It's as simple as that.
Captain,
Yes.
a lot has been said about the procedure. You've clearly stated the procedure that ought to be followed, including what Wakili says. The moment you arrest someone, it's because you're going to take them to a court of law.
True.
Up until this moment, no one is telling us what Ojwang's crime was. Now, we hear the DIG made a request. He
made a complaint.
He made a complaint.
So, yeah.
And then now there is a question of he was picked up from Mawego. We're now talking about the Central Police Station where he was dropped, as you say. Question is, those in charge of maintaining law and order seem to be the ones breaking the same law they're supposed to be protecting. And it is repetitively over and over and over again. What seems to be the problem with the service?
It's very simple, leadership. You see, the police is hierarchical in nature. The police works under command and orders. The way we used, the way the military functions. You function under instructions, commands, and orders. If the person in charge of this officer is not holding his forte as per the law, the officers will misbehave. And that's why I keep on saying, under the National Police Service, the person we need to be holding to account at the lowest level is the OCS. Because everything happens under a police station. So when Mr. DIG Langat orders people to go and pick the late is brought to Nairobi, but the only person who can allow this person to be booked into the police station is the OCS. And that's why we keep on saying, for as long as we keep on talking, if the leadership of the police service will never be taken to account, because this country needs to hold the leadership of the police service to account. They are the ones who give instructions to their junior officers. They are the ones who are supposed to discipline their junior officers. They are the ones who are supposed to hand over these officers to the court of law when they misbehave. Because when you look at everything they've written down under service standing orders, the act Wakili Ukapa. When you look at, I think it's section 95, 1, 2, 3. It talks about cruelty to Kenyans. It talks about torture, what is supposed to happen to these officers. If they are not going to be held to account, then we shall be talking until cows come home, because that is where the problem is. Leadership and responsibility. When we were doing police reform the other day with Maraga, one of the things we looked at was about suitability and competence. How is somebody appointed to a position where he holds or she holds responsibility? Is that person competent for that position? Is that person suitable for the roles they are being given? And that is the biggest issue we have in Kenya. And I've been in this sector for long. Dennis, you are my witness.
Yes.
I've been in the police reforms for over 20 years now. And every time we discuss about issues of reforming the police, we always go back to leadership.
Yeah.
We always go back to leadership. At some time, Madam, when we were doing the vetting, you remember the famous vetting? One of the reasons why we decided to do vetting was to get rid of a certain cadre of police officers. We believe that if we remove this top echelon, then we remain with these other people who can be built up to be good officers. Something will change. So I think to answer you, that is where the problem is.
Leadership.
Okay. So we're going to go to a break in just a minute, but want to come back here because we want to hear the results of the autopsy that then took place. Because then what an autopsy does, it's number one, very clear medically, but then it's also legal in nature because you can use that to then deduce what actually happened to a body. And what happened to this person while they were still alive that would have led to death. Now, coming from the statement which was made by the NPS, which you alluded to earlier, Nelson, is that then what the autopsy does is that it removes any doubt whatsoever that his death came about as a result of suicide. And that it is clear now that murder has taken place. Then as we listen to this, we'd like you to come back and tell us, so then what should happen next after the autopsy then is very clear listening. Advocate of the High Court as well as Captain retired Dr. Simiu Werunga, we're looking at then very clearly what must happen. And if possible, that we remove emotion and obviously something that has gripped the nation in the manner in which it has. And if we're going to follow the rule of law, we saw it can happen. We allude to where we have seen the police act with speed and alacrity before. Why would we still have conversations around maybe? Because I would imagine that with the results of the autopsy yesterday, then what Wakili had said just before we went to the break then should kick in almost immediately. That the autopsy results have shown 1, 2, 3. It was clearly a case of murder. He would not have done this to himself. We would have expected then that the DPP would have come in right after that. We would have expected that there would have been a statement from IPOA. We would have expected that the Inspector General of Police, Douglas Kanja, would have come out the manner in which he came out on Monday and said, based on this is the next step of recourse. Why do we see that there's snail-paced movement then around this? Because this autopsy result was given in the afternoon of yesterday. Why would it be so slow?
We were just chatting here. We need to be clear. When we talk about leadership in the police service, when we talk about miasma in the police service, we are not talking about the whole service. But we have elements in the police service that are actually making things very difficult even for the IG. I've known the IG personally for a long time, and I'm not speaking for him. And I know he's one of the few professional officers we have in the police service. Kanja has been very steadfast in what he does from the GSU, for DIG, and the IG now. So the problem we are having is, yes, we have problems of leadership, but not in the totality of the police service. Number two, I think where I sit, we might have to ask Kanja to stop issuing press conferences. You see, there's a hierarchy in the police service. If this thing happened in Nairobi Central Police Station, we have a regional commander in Nairobi. And that officer is based somewhere near Integrity Center there.
Yes.
That should be the person issuing statements because that police station falls under that regional commander. So that Kanja can remove himself and be the last person to issue what Kenyans can take for the good. So that is one problem that we are having. I think I will advise him to surrender that portfolio, let the regional commander be speaking about this issue so that when Kenyans feel like they are not satisfied, then they can go to the IG, who is the final person in the police service. Number two, I think from the word go, there was a mismatch in the way they handled this thing. Douglas Kanja came out very quickly to issue a statement before everything else was known about this police officer. So retracting what he had already said is becoming an issue. And that's why we are saying, under systems that have hierarchies and command leadership, it's always good when you let the people who are immediately in charge to speak about what is happening, then you come in as a final person. So to me, that's where the problem is. We now know exactly what happened. We still have a lot of things that I think we are not sure what happened. But like Howie said, these were DCI officers. They took this body to Central Police Station. We hear the OCS refused to receive the body. We are not sure. But when you look at the OB, it is written Mugonjwa. Is it Mugonjwa or sick? When it was received. Now, if it is true the OCS refused to receive this person because he was sick, then the OCS was doing his work. Because at the end of the day, it was him who was going to be responsible for what happened to that officer, to that young man. If it is true he said no, then he was doing his work. Because at the end of the day, it is him who is in charge of the police station. And the law is very clear. What is the unit of servicing in the country? It's a police station. So to me, that's where the problem is, madam.
Captain, I have a quick question here.
Yes.
You say there are a few elements within the police hierarchy that are not making things any easier,
Yes.
and especially for the IG. Is there a rogue unit within the police service? Because we keep on hearing there's a unit that is receiving instructions elsewhere, outside the IG's playbook. Is there a rogue unit that is actually doing these things?
You see, if I tell you yes, I'll be lying to you. But what we know happens in this kind of democracies that are not very mature, we have what we call alternative leadership systems. So the alternative is they work parallel to the system that is official. So Kanja is in charge of the National Police Service as we know it. But then there's a parallel system that is getting instructions and maybe doing things outside what Kanja is doing.
Is it legal?
It's not legal, of course, but we call it parallel systems. It's illegal, but it's a parallel system. So you'll find that always in democracies that are not mature, we always have people who give themselves the liberty to do things that are illegal and they're not answerable to the structure of the National Police Service. So our suspicion is we have that parallel system that is doing its own things outside the framework and the leadership, direct leadership with the IG of the National Police Service.
So with that information, you say there is all the parallel that is
Yes.
there. There is the question of the police is there to serve the public, right?
Yes.
And with that, as we see it at the moment, trust between Kenyans and police is broken, irrevocably broken, that no one trusts the police. Wakili, what will it take for Kenyans to have a semblance of we can't trust the police again?
You know, Kenya is a state. We cannot work without the police.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. We can never eradicate the police. But where is the problem? I do not think the police are the problem. The problem is the abuse of police power by the ruling class. I've appeared in many police stations to resolve matters. Unless there is interference from above, as they always say, the junior most police officer will not even take command from the Inspector General of Police to contravene the law. It's as simple as that. They will tell you, look, boss, I am following the law. But when the ruling class is involved, then everything will be thrown away. Look at what happened during 25th June 2024. The command that was in charge of killing protesters in parliament was not under the authority, the line authority of the National Police Service. In fact, you saw so many civilians, people who could identify, some retired KDF officers with AK-47 who had deployed them there. And you see, that's why I've insisted the abduction and killing of innocent Kenyans was done by police officers for the better part of last year and for early this year on the command of the political ruling class. Now, some of these police officers who have tested blood on the instructions of the ruling political class think they can now do it on their own. You understand? At this rate, every senior police officer who claims he has been unfairly criticized will take the law onto his hand. Let me give you the perfect example. This gentleman called Leleman, who was in charge of killing Kimani. I know him very well. At one point in time, was called by a very senior political figure just across here in Mombasa Road to come and intervene on a case of robbery. And he went there and he shot the 4 suspects in plain sight during the day.
No question.
No question. You understand? So he kept on doing this thing at the behest and request of senior leaders here in Nairobi. Then at one point in time, he thought, I may as well do it for myself. So let the political class stay clear of the police command. Let the police do their work. If the police are allowed to do their work, you will not hear of this nonsense. Because we can't do without the police. They are a necessary component of the state as it's known in modern time. But they must be allowed to do their work.
The power of the search for control then, unfortunately, then makes its way into some of these elements that we see. And that's why, unfortunately, even if we are to engage in conjecture, Wakili, that had it not been that there was the insistence on where Ojwang was then when he left Homa Bay, and then somebody said he's turned up at Bagavi dead. Had it not been on that insistence, sadly, this would have been another case where somebody's body was dumped somewhere and nobody would have been left to answer. So even when we speak about this, the insistence on there having to be the following of the rule of law is what people are crying for today. People are crying tears for
before you go far, let me tell you this. There are many well-meaning police officers.
Sure.
Many, especially the DCI. The reason why this cover-up has been unfolded is because of diligent efforts by a few dedicated officers at the DCI. They said will not be complicit.
We're going to tell.
Will not be complicit to this murder. And I want to encourage those few police officers who do the right thing. One of them called me yesterday. He knows himself. He did a good job. Continue doing that good job. Johnson Odor did a good job. He refused to go and write a report of cover-up. Let many officers realize that they are Kenyans. You are our brothers, you are our fathers, you are husbands to our sisters. Do the right job. When you do the right job, and in fact, I don't think there's anything wrong in Kanja saying what he said. You know, had Kanja not told us this gentleman was arrested on a complaint of the DIG, we'll never known what happened. So Kanja did the right thing. And you see, the theory in murder trial, even the most perfect offender will conceal 15 of the mistakes, but one will
come out.
Will be disclosed.
Wakili, we've lived in this country long enough to know beyond the cover-ups, when now there's an uproar and people are so outraged and they want justice, it's normally the small fish or the junior officers who are going to take the fall. Now, looking at the statement, and that's what we have officially, the officers who are interdicted from Central, because Mawego, we are not hearing anything from there. We have the officer commanding station, the OCS Central. We have the duty officer on duty during the night in question. Then we have the cell sentry on duty at the time. And then all officers who are on duty at the report office that night. Then the last one is any other officer found to have been on duty or otherwise involved during the incident. It's a bit ambiguous. My question is, these are the officers we know officially who have been interdicted. When the IG was issuing this statement, though it contradicted with an earlier statement, the DIG was standing next to him. Legally, when you are interdicting all these officers and anybody who might be involved, should he have been there standing with the IG, or should he also exclude himself to be investigated, because the IG said he is the complainant after all?
Dennis Okare, how old is the IG?
62, 63 years.
Yes, he's not supposed to be in office. He's a pawn. They have put him there past his retirement age so that they can manipulate him. They have insurance on him. The person in charge of the police force, it's not a service, it's the DIG, that Langat. And the right thing must be done. Langat must be arrested and charged in court. This is not above the law. In this world, we've had presidents charged and arrested. Arrested and charged in court. We need Lagat arrested. And if the police cannot do that, the people of Kenya have the residual power to arrest Lagat. And the Director of Public Prosecution must stop procrastinating. If he can't do the job, let him leave office. This Lagat must be in court. Not tomorrow, yesterday. And you see, the moment he's in court as the principal offender, all the chips will fall into place. Of course, a murder of this enterprise was not committed by one person. So rightfully so, even those individuals lower in rank who have been interdicted will speak. But they'll speak more truthfully when Langat is in custody and or has taken plea.
Will they be able to speak when Lagat is out?
They will
Because he's
speak.
not been arrested.
They will speak when he's arrested and has taken plea.
Should
So
it-
that is the test. And that is the biggest test that the Director of Public Prosecution will now face. Prosecuting the DIG of the National Police Service. And if he gets it right, then as a country we'll have gotten it right. We'll end this impunity.
There is silence as well on the individuals who picked up Albert
Yes.
from Homa Bay and brought him all the way to Nairobi, because like we're doing the maths yesterday, from Homa Bay to Nairobi is around 5 hours. You know, we're talking about over 13 hours before he ended up at Central. So should these individuals as well be mentioned, interdicted as investigations continue? Because that is one part that is silent.
You know, I've been arrested, I think, twice or thrice. Once I'd gone to rescue the senator of Bomet, and we were both arrested and renditioned all the way to Bomet. We were on the road for almost 10 hours. You know, often the Subarus will stop, they take us out and tell us, you know, we don't even know why you guys have been.
They're just receiving orders.
Could you tell us why you've been arrested? They change the plates. Eventually we reach Bomet and they tell us, I think we really have to release you guys because we're being abused. The other time they came to pick me in my office where the squabbles at the LSK. Kept me for the entire 10 hours. In fact, the guy who was driving was a Kalenjin gentleman. Said, Kirigit, sijui ya watu wanasumbue kwa nini? Sisi hapa najua ametumwa tu kushika. I mean, to be honest, the fellows who went to pick Ojwang were just told, go and bring him. It's most likely. Especially if the complainants, the DIG, they didn't even question the authority. And to the extent, if at all they followed the rule book of going to seek permission of the local
OCS,
and they minuted their movement, they'll most likely have a proper defense. But there are fellows who cannot run away from this. The DIG himself, the OCS Central, and everybody who was in charge of Ojwang during the time that he was being confined and during the time that he was killed. Yes.
I want us to listen into what Albert Ojwang's father asked for after, you know, the happenings, and then see how that would marry with the next steps that then ought to be taken. Let's listen into that.
Ninasikitika. Mtoto wangu ni mtoto mmoja, hakuna msichana, hakuna mvulana hata nyuma yake. Nimeteseka na huyo mtoto huko pwani nikiwa kwa Kware ya Timbo miaka 20 ili mtoto akapokea shahada ya degree hapo Pwani University. Nilikuwa napiga moyo konde nikisema ya kwamba hata ikiwa mimi nateseka na mavumbi, mtoto wangu afadhali asome, atakuja kunisaidia katika maisha ya usoni. Miaka yangu imeenda. Sasa kitambo nimfuge mtoto mpaka amalize, itapata wapi? Alifanya nini mtoto wangu hata auawe kiasi hicho? Sina raha. Natumai ningemwona huyo mkubwa, hata na mimi angeniua.
Mtoto jina yake kamili ilikuwa
Ni Albert Omondi Ojwang. Sasa ni miaka 31, amezaliwa 1994.
And that's his father, Mzee Ojwang, asking questions about what should happen. So he speaks from the point of view from a father who's lost his son, whose son was murdered. But then in terms of the rule of law, there is obviously what must be demanded according to the law. And it's not emotion here. It's clear fact. But Captain Warunga, what should we expect to hear if we're then operating in a sane environment? What should we hear today? We didn't hear it yesterday, but let's say today we'll hear it. What should it be?
I think there's something we also forgot to mention. Under the standing orders, the OCS of Central Police Station is supposed to have reported to IPOA that somebody came in, he was sick, then he was taken to Bagadhe Hospital. He died in Bagadhe or Central, I'm not very sure. So that's one element that we need to pick from the OCS. So to answer your question is, we are expecting that all cases of death are investigated normally by IPOA if they happen in the hands of the police service. So once we get to that point where IPOA has done its job, and we are not sure because it's a new team, I'm not very sure whether we have confidence in them, but ideally that is the first step that needs to be done, and I think they started. This is the first case we want to see whether they have the capacity and the will to handle this kind of serious cases in Kenya. If they do it, then from there they're supposed to hand over that file to the DPP. And I think if we have such a good lawyers outside who feel like something can be done, then they can take an alternative route. But ideally, IPOA is supposed to do these things very quickly, hand over the file to the DPP, then the DPP will decide whether it is proper for the officers to be arraigned in court.
Captain, I know within the National Police Service,
Yes.
there's a department that handles internal affairs. With this autopsy report now finally out,
Yes.
what is going on in terms of internal investigations? Because those ones are carried now within the service. What do you think is currently happening?
First, it's not even based on the autopsy report. Once this thing came into public and there was clear evidence that the young man was murdered in the hands of the police service, the internal police service, whatever unit, is supposed to immediately start investigating to understand the circumstances under which this young man was killed under the custody of the police. Now, that is called a disciplinary process that is done by the internal unit. Then the criminal, whatever nature it is, outside the police service is done by the IPOA. So we want to imagine that the head of internal unit service, they quickly picked up the story. They must be questioning these officers who are involved, even if they are suspended. They must be questioning the officers who went and picked the young man from Homa Bay. That is what they are supposed to do. And in the event that these officers do not appear in court under criminal procedure, then there are disciplinary procedures within the police service that are supposed to be taken once it's been determined that these officers are capable for doing what everybody is talking about. So those are the two avenues that this case is going to be taking place.
How difficult is it to oversee it when it is involving your boss?
You see, there's this when we established the internal police unit, whatever we call it, it is supposed to be an independent unit, outside, not even under the IG. But the head of that unit is supposed to be appointed by the National Police Service Commission. So the essence was you have this unit that is so independent that it can investigate anybody in the police service, notwithstanding the rank, and be able to hand over this report to the IG for information, but then to proceed and undertake disciplinary processes in the police service. Then we also created, because I remember we were part of this system, we created IPOA and said anything outside the service personnel, then we give it to IPOA that works with DPP to make sure that whatever is done by these police officers is then taken to court and the procedure follows. So the answer I think I've given you is we should imagine that the unit is already working on talking to these officers, taking statements to ensure that if in the event they are not found to be culpable and be part of those who killed this young man, then any other disciplinary process within the framework of the police standing orders should be taking place after the investigation.
So there is what the IAU is doing. But then
Yes.
again, Wakili, you mentioned something earlier in terms of any arrest should be done under, if someone is being taken to court and also under the advice of the DPP. But clearly this is information that has not been shared thus far. It is not clear whether that happened. So then again, what should we see the DPP recommend? Because this is a glaring figure that was missed in that process.
Well, for clarity, you should only be arrested when there has been a decision to charge you.
Okay.
Unless you've committed an offense in the presence of a police officer. You understand? or unless it is an offense that requires your apprehension. For instance, if you stab somebody in public, you're supposed to be arrested.
Yes.
But if it's a matter that requires investigations, your first interaction with the police should not be an arrest. Now, let's concentrate on this matter. We have a weak-kneed leadership of the IPOA. Weak-kneed because when presented with a lot of evidence, IPOA refused to make a recommendation to charge police officers who are responsible for the killing of innocent Kenyans during the occupation of Parliament on the 25th of June last year. He came out, Isaac, and said, I'm helpless. Of course, he was not helpless. He refused to do his job. You understand? I think there was interference with the ruling class. In this particular case, if there is no interference because he holds a constitutional office, he may do his job. What has the ODPP done? He has said he wants that file before his desk within 7 days. Let's just give him 7 days. After 7 days, the logical thing that he ought to do is to order the arrest of DIG Lagat and all accessories to this murder. The principal suspect must be DIG Lagat. If the recommendation of the ODPP will not have the name of Lagat as the principal suspect, then treat it as hogwash.
We've seen situations whereby, sadly, the distrust or the mistrust in the system then has been compacted a lot more for the citizens. And I'm just going to go very recently to the issue of when acting Inspector General Masengeli at that time was required to come before court. There were 6 summons that were sent to him. He did not appear for any of the 6, but appeared on the 7th, and he was essentially forgiven of that. And on the very same day of that 7th summons is when the 4 gentlemen from Kitengela mysteriously showed up, having been dumped in certain areas.
You know, I handle this matter.
Yeah. So even as you give some to that, then the question tagged to that would be, how then would we imagine that a system within which these gentlemen are operating would then arrest them and charge them if the rule of law in other cases has not been followed?
There is a mistrust of the police, but what can we do? The other day when I alighted from Mombasa, police officers came to assist me. They will always come to assist me. Then there was this reluctance on my part. Then I realized, no, it's not them who have killed Ojwang. You understand? We live in this environment. So we must find a way of making it better. As I said, these police officers are our brothers. They are our fathers. They are husbands to our sisters. We need to find a way in which it will work better. Now, picking from the Masengeli story, is it going to go the same way? You know, Masengeli sent a contingent of Luya elders to speak to me because I'm a Luya elder. And the government told me, you know, Masengeli doesn't know what is happening. So don't beat your brother so much. Much as I was beating him, I believe he didn't know what was happening. At that particular time was also a pawn. These people, the ruling political class that had abducted the Kitengela 3, were holding the 3, and they were devising means of disentangling them from this mess. You understand? And they didn't want Masengeli to appear in court because he would have said the truth the way Kanja said the truth. You understand? So for as long as nobody is being coerced, is being subdued to keep quiet, the truth in the matter of the murder of Albert Ojwang will be told. And I have a strong feeling it will be told. You know, you can't do this forever. And maybe it had to take the sacrifice of Albert Ojwang for us to nab a senior-most police officer and charge him with murder for this nonsense to end once and for all. Let it end.
Let it end. And that's where we end our conversation this morning. Gone past 8 o'clock, but necessary for us to do. And at that point where we say, if this is what it takes for this, if his sacrifice for the rule of law to be followed, for this kind of behavior to come to an end, then let it end.
Let it end.
Nelson Havi, 49th president of the LSK, as well as Captain retired Dr. Simiu Werunga, public security and safety expert, have been our guests this hour, looking into the steps of what next. Death in custody, who's legally and operationally accountable? It's clear who is. The day will be long in terms of seeing what happens next, but we'll end on those words that Nelson has said.